Everyone needs a home. It's as basic as food, water, and clothing. But it's getting harder and harder for families in San Antonio to have one or to keep one. Why is that? We've been trying to wrap our heads around this complex question that affects a lot of us. It's a deeply personal issue, and it's also about our whole community.
And new at 5, home prices, they continue to climb to the rafters.
Skyrocketing home prices.
It's a U.S. housing crisis. It's hitting San Antonio as well these days.
Last month, the median price of homes sold here was $311,000, $317,000, $326,000,
$375,000.
Buyers are getting stuck in bidding wars.
The average interest on a 30-year mortgage is over 7%, close to a 2-decade high.
We've been talking to people all across our city. This effort is part of a larger project at the H.E. Butt Foundation called Know Your Neighbor, where we listen to the stories of our neighbors and how they're experiencing all kinds of complex challenges.
We're trying to live our dreams. We're trying to have a home.
I want to know, I want to own my own home. That's my thing.
Housing is a system of policies, rules, and regulations. It's a market that goes up and down, and that sometimes seems to change overnight. It's a history of development that many of us don't see or understand. But it's also memories and family. It's shared meals and bedtime stories. Housing is about home, and everyone needs a home.
At the root, the base of it is that individuals need safe, quality housing. They need that for themselves, they need that for their families, they need that so their families can succeed.
So we've identified in San Antonio, there's 95,000 vulnerable households, people that are cost burdened, that are spending more than 30% of their take-home pay on housing.
But there's a lot of people that are at 50% of the median income. They can't find housing under $1,200 a month mortgage payment, which is roughly 30%. Then all of a sudden you have to make tough decisions about what you're going to give up. And they're primary things like food, gas that affects employment. I'm going to feed my family. I've got to have gas in my car to go to work, and I'm going to keep the lights on, so the shortfall defaults to the rent. And so I'll get behind and I'll figure something out and pay the late fees. And so then it just spirals from there.
Take the taser?
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it.
All right.
Hello. Susan!
Hello. Constable's office. Clear. Come over here so I can talk to you. Come over, Susan. You have 24 hours to get your stuff. And you know about the trailer. You have to move within 24 hours.
I'm broke. I'm broke. Now what?
Yeah.
She's getting some stuff. Go ahead, let's start. I've been doing this for 22 years coming January. Yeah, I could definitely see a change then. Back then we do, 5 writ of possessions a week. Now we're doing 10, 15 a day, multiple units in apartment complexes or houses or, even businesses these days. The locks are changed? Yeah. Lock it up, we're done. Yeah. How you doing, sir? Writ executed. I'm in the field of evicting people, and it's a big spectrum. From criminal activity to pay rent to, the banks foreclosing. You can't pay your taxes. The county's taking your property away to sell or to pay those taxes. It's just a big eye-opener, When I first started in 2001, and it was a mother and 3 daughters, and I was leaving the property, and there was the couch on the parking lot, and the 3 girls, probably the oldest one was 10, were sitting on the couch as I was leaving, and that really hurt me. Like, wow, I'm gonna be doing this for the rest of my career, But I made sure they had something to drink, and I came back with snacks and stuff, and the mother assured me that they were going with some family members, and well, that was the first one I did, and here we are 22 years later, so.
Next one.
For families in need of affordable housing, there are 2 main government programs they can take advantage of: public housing and vouchers. San Antonio has about 6,000 public housing units and just over 14,000 housing vouchers, which can be used to pay for rent. As we've talked with folks who have used both of these programs, they told us about long waiting lists to know if you're even approved. They've talked about facing evictions, but they've also talked about very restricted opportunities even when they do land a home. Public housing in places that take vouchers are concentrated into a handful of areas of town with limited resources for them and their kids. They lack things as basic as good sidewalks and streets, and vital resources like healthcare.
We would say, like, in our time, last 10 years on the east side, like, housing stability is the first thing you need for health to occur. Let's not even worry about wealth. Like, if we're trying to get people to health, like healthy family, healthy education, healthy job, housing stability is critical. And everything that's happened in the past 10 years has made that more difficult.
We grew up in the Lincoln Court projects in apartments all our life. We ended up moving with my father, and he had a home. It's always been driven in my head to own my own spot. Like, so wherever I go, I want to own it, and that's what I want to give my kids. It's like the foundation. The buck stops now. And that's why I was like, you know what? This is what it is. I got to do it. I got to sacrifice. But we're not going to have this continual circle going on in the Brown house. it stops now. Everybody gonna start gaining and building generational wealth from now to the end. And so that's how important owning a home is to me, and because it starts there.
There's a lot of debate from an economic perspective of, is it better to rent or is it better to own? But it's not even about that. It's about housing security. It's about being able to know that you have a home and what happens with that home is your decision. But that is something that is very commonly out of reach for most families.
In most people's cases, it's the largest source of their worth, the equity in a home. And it is, they say don't buy a home for an investment, but truly long-term, yeah, I would disagree. I would say with just the pay down of that mortgage and the appreciation that's occurring and stuff like that, that's a great asset to pass on a family, and there's that pride of ownership, and there's so many benefits from it.
How are these families going to begin to create any kind of generational wealth if they don't have any assets? Yeah, it's easy to build multifamily housing and help solve the housing crisis, but people are never going to own something to kind of start that. I worry more and more that the idea of the American dream is getting further and further away from us, right?
I want to know, I want to own my own home. That's my thing. And I looked at about 8 houses, different homes, and I didn't get none of them. Everything's already set at a price that keeping you out, basically. And I mean, from my experience, everything is already skyrocketing. Yeah, once I couldn't get me nothing to own, then I was like, well, let's just find something to rent, So then you're forced to go back down to somewhere you don't want to be, to find housing and to find somewhere to stay. And even then, it's hard to get into there. So then I end up moving here. So that's how I end up being here.
Until we actually get to a point where, one, we either have housing security for renters widespread, which is a really tough challenge, then we have to keep encouraging people and helping them bridge that gap into home ownership so that they can actually have a say in what happens with their property and the cost of their housing, and then also stand to benefit when things are happening in and around them.
It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and blood, sweat, and tears to build affordable housing. There's no free market incentive necessarily to building, those affordable, family units right now, because those who are buying homes are in the higher end of the range.
It's real simple economics of the less house you build, the less land you own, the cheaper it should be. Now, the way to flip that script is if I have a lot and rather than putting 1 house on it, I put 4. That takes the cost of that dirt and divides it by 4 now, right? But then you look again at the rules. We created zoning because people were over-densifying. Well, people were over-densifying with simple economics. You couldn't afford to live in the housing. So is one of the beneficial things that we try to do that was more good for people is let's create zoning policies to protect these people. I believe in that. That was a good move. Government steps in and intervenes in the system to make sure we have basic, safe housing. Well, that could also get out of control too.
What is the reason that most low-income or mixed-income housing projects don't happen in other areas? You'd find that in most cases, it's because of the zoning. It's because once there is an opportunity for the community to come out against it and deny that zoning, that's where they die. And so instead, they get located closer to the inner city.
The thing that I find frustrating with that is that, so why should somebody that rents not be allowed to be in your neighborhood? What's wrong with renters? I said, so when you vote against multifamily housing, you're actually voting against yourself from when you were recently graduated from college or recently divorced or recently married, when you didn't have a whole lot of money, but you wanted to be in the community. And that's the thing that's amazing to me about single family detached zoning is it actually keeps people from moving into the community. It's a barrier. That's a red line.
Sometimes I feel the more I hear about this, the more I don't know. Every person we've talked to in this project makes me realize how much more there is to learn. There's more context to discover. There's the context of choices each of us make about where we live and where we buy our own home. And there's the context of the choices that are made by the powers that be, elected officials or big players in the market. The more context we get, the more the problem comes into focus.
We moved here in 2015. We had about 2.5, 3 days to look for a house. And I think this is a pretty common experience. People get a job across the country and they have a short, window in which to pick a home. We had 3 kids in middle school and younger. So we had a short window with which to make a really big commitment, and decide which neighborhood are we going to live in a city that we don't really know that well. Honestly, we weren't thinking about the city overall. We were just thinking about a place to land, kind of a soft landing, we kept saying, where we could find a home that what's at the intersection of what we can afford and where we think the schools are going to be good. And we settled into our neighborhood, and we loved our home and got to know our neighbors, and it felt like a pretty good landing for a while. It was about a year after we got here that I had insomnia one night. And so I got up in the middle of the night and I'm reading the Express News. It's about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And they had just started a new series in the paper called The Next Million. And it was about the tremendous growth of San Antonio. And it talked about how we're going to keep growing, there's going to need to be more development. And the question the reporter was asking is, where are all these people going to go? She ended up talking about the whole history of development of San Antonio. And in that night, just reading that paper, I learned a lot about the city that I had moved into. I learned about, the history of deed restrictions in the early days, early 20th century, where San Antonio was developed in whites-only neighborhoods, and neighborhoods where people who were of Mexican descent or African descent were not permitted to live legally. And then the history of redlining, where the federal government and banks kind of worked together to figure out where they could make quote-unquote safe investments. Those were in neighborhoods where they knew that only white people lived. And it was eye-opening. And I realized that the decision I had made a year before, quick decision, where are the good schools, where can I afford, was a decision that had actually a lot of consequences, a lot of implications for the meaning of that decision beyond just where I lived, that I hadn't thought through before.
Most of my career was in the city of San Antonio, and I worked in downtown redevelopment. And so the idea was, how do we make our city more competitive by having a more attractive and competitive downtown, making our downtown a place where people want to be, where businesses want to be, where corporate headquarters want to be. And so it really kind of instilled in me this investment and focus on place. That was kind of really my whole first foray into the understanding of gentrification and displacement, because the focus was all about downtown and how do we make that the best it can be. The unintended consequence there is, what happens in the market as a result? As one place gets hot, there starts to be investment, and then there tends to be speculation. And if I'm making an investment, I need to maximize that investment. And maybe that tenant isn't the best way to maximize that investment. And so as a result, you end up with this unintended consequence of gentrification. And so I got to see that firsthand in the work we were doing, which is important from an economic perspective, but then the human factor of it was jarring.
This is the case that we're taking up, again, related to Mission Trails. We have 54 individuals signed up to speak.
If this zoning change does occur, I'm pretty certain that I'm gonna have to drop out of college. We're trying to live our dreams. We're trying to have a home. We're trying to get the city to vote no to the zoning change. We're waiting for a miracle. We want the city to actually stand up, protect us, you know?
This zoning case, of course, is one which we have to give very long and hard deliberation to, and which during the course of the hearing 4 weeks ago and today, many of the residents who have spoken have given the council a lot to think about.
Well, good evening. Developers couldn't move forward with this project until the city agreed to rezone this land to allow for those high-end apartments. The council could have done that last month, but decided to hold off on a decision until today.
We have no plan for displaced residents. They have no place to go.
Tenemos que ser animales para que nos puedan apoyar.
Do we have to become animals so we can get your support?
When we grow and when we become a wonderful big city, what is the story going to be told of how we treated the most vulnerable people in our community?
The property along the river, especially on the south side, the river before it was picked up was a drainage ditch. And so who lived along it? It was a lot of trailer parks, right? And really vital little communities, but they were low income. Whenever we invest in a particular place, because it's a fixed, immobile investment, that investment impacts the things around it. The really productive public investments that we have made recently, and the easiest to envision is the Riverwalk. That property becomes more valuable, it becomes more sought after. The demand for that property goes way up because people want to be next to these beautiful new public investments. That's private property. The city doesn't have any say over that. They have a say in terms of zoning. Beyond that, that's private property. And this is the state of Texas. And that's the most cherished right that we have, is the right to do what we want on private property. So it flipped. Those things flipped immediately. And now we've got these condominium complexes where we used to have trailer parks.
Thank you very much for your patience. We will now resume our city council meeting.
How do we reconcile the fact you want to stay and the property owner wants to sell?
If we were to vote no, that the owner would then come and just evict everybody.
I just want to stay on your property. That's what you want. But I'm here to tell you that's not something we can give you, unfortunately.
And so I felt like there weren't really any options.
I, for one, will have the guts to vote yes because I want to protect you even if you don't understand that this would be the best option for you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Please vote. All right, motion carries. That means that the zoning has passed 6 votes to 4 votes. All right, that concludes our city council meeting. Thank you all very much.
Through the 1960s, housing was highly valued for its use value. This is my home, and people would stay in their home for a lifetime. In 1960, federal government creates what are called real estate investment trusts, right? Which makes real estate a comparable investment strategy to stocks and bonds. It doesn't take off right away, but 1986 recession, where we saw hundreds of thousands of foreclosures, right? And so much housing being available and capital kind of ready and willing to kind of swoop in, gather up these houses as a new and kind of investment strategy. That happens again in 2008. When we see what happens in the real estate market, lots and lots of houses on the market, undervalued, capital swoops in and buys all of these houses up. And who is this? Is that these are, it's the equivalent of mutual funds. What's really driving this is that kind of speculative opportunity of making a ton of money. This is global. This is global capital coming in and flying around our landscape right now. These are people coming from around the world and looking at a place like San Antonio that's got property that's depreciated, property that's still close to the inner city, where we've invested in a lot of beautiful public spaces, tried to make it really safe. Like, we put on, we fixed it up. This has become really valuable.
Everybody's prices are going up and our checks aren't. So, kind of scary, the outcome, actually. All right, we should be pulling up here. I know a lot of people from out of state are coming into San Antonio and they're kind of buying real estate. They're people from California, people from different states, and I noticed that quite a bit. So again, like, good and bad. I don't know the specifics about, why they're coming, and maybe it's cheaper here in San Antonio to live.
Okay, that's your copy there. Thank you. These investors, they buy these homes cheap and flip them or rent them out. And she was in a hurry to do so. I wish them luck. See how that goes.
There was a recent report showing that over 40% of homes in San Antonio in 2021 were bought by LLCs, which is to say they weren't bought by individuals who were planning on living in them. They're maybe using them as short-term rentals. They may be using them as rehabs. And what they're essentially doing is taking those homes off the market for San Antonians.
Couples that are out looking first-time home buyers and stuff, they're competing with institutional investors that are taking that property off the market and converting it to a rental unit.
All right, moving right along. Case number 2011 TA102563. Bernadette Burdens in the city of San Antonio, Bexar County, Texas. I have a minimum bid starting at $6,000. You're just waving? Careful.
The first Tuesday of every month, properties that are getting foreclosed on, whatever the case is, they get here and investors come out to bid on them so they can just purchase the property.
66,000 going once, 66,000, 67,000, 83,000, 89,000 going twice, 95,000. Sold the gentleman in the cap for 96,000.
We get a bunch of off-market properties in our inventory, and we try to find an investor to fix, flip them, rent them out, or Airbnb them.
Yeah, so I build houses in San Antonio and Bernie. I'm here today at the auction because I have a client who is interested in building a house in Bernie. So we found 2 lots that were available for sale at the sheriff's auction because the HOA dues had not been paid. And we thought we could pick up a deal on those 2 lots, which we did.
Well, I am a real estate broker in San Antonio, and I represent investors that buy at auction. So we're here, placing bids on properties.
13,000?
14,100.
17,000. 17,500. 40,000.
I mean, honestly, everybody here is looking for a deal. So trying to find, where the market price and the price we can get it here are different.
The owners of the property have defaulted in the payment and performance of their obligations to the association. The association has requested me as substitute trustee to conduct this sale.
Without this, you have people that aren't abiding by the rules, and without these rules in place, nobody pays their bills. This is the only thing keeping from people from actually stopping paying, because otherwise, the banks everybody will just get a bailout. So I think it's healthy that this comes back and is in full swing.
When we first moved to the east side, you could buy lots. Vacant lots were $5,000 and vacant houses were $25,000. Development definitely started to escalate. Properties started to get bought up really quickly. People that were traditionally, renters and landlords were just, given offers that they couldn't kind of refuse. It didn't happen overnight, but all of a sudden one day you woke up and there's no place for people to live, on the east side at all.
San Antonio has become a real estate playground. We've all seen the "We Buy Houses" signs. In some parts of town, the text messages, the phone calls, the knocks on their doors, and all cash offers are nonstop. It's not just individual homes. One organization told us of an investor looking to buy up to 100 houses at once. Our city is changing. It's exciting, and there are upsides for some, but it's also happening so fast. San Antonio has become a marketplace for the world. From local developers to international investors, San Antonio is ripe for the picking.
I was born in Southtown in San Antonio, and I graduated in 2010 from architecture. And then I got 2 job offers in San Antonio. I worked new construction, renovation, additions, guest houses in the King William area, Terrell Hills. I worked on a lot of single-family high-end residential. It was fun to imagine with really generous budgets what was possible. That is a creative space that I don't take for granted, but the conversations about context in the neighborhood were never really at the forefront. I became more aware of the amount of control that developers and real estate investors have on how the city is continuing to grow or not grow. I was asking about community and impact and public meetings, and they're like, that's not what we were hired for. And I was like, well, maybe it should be, right?
My departure, my transition from architecture, I think really came out of how, in my experience, traditional architecture felt really about an individual and not about a collective. I moved away to do affordable housing work. I was a nonprofit affordable housing developer in the Boston area for about 3 years. So I moved back because San Antonio passed the Strategic Housing Implementation Plan and because of the affordable housing bond. It was voted on and approved the week that I started.
I moved back for this role to be the community engagement administrator in the Neighborhood and Housing Services Department to make sure that we were listening as we continue to develop affordable housing. Wanted to make sure our programs and services were informed by community. And I also wanted to make sure communities were actually utilizing our programs and services. Affordable housing bond is not going to solve all of the housing affordability issues in the city, right? It's a tool, it's a start. It is an opportunity for developers to leverage funding to produce more housing affordability so more people can be housed. It's also an opportunity for people to remain in their homes, right? So if you have a repair that you need in your home, you're able to do that so that you can spend other money on taxes, or you can spend money on food, or you can spend money on education. What are the ways in which we are preserving already existing affordable housing?
This is too complex of an issue for any one solution, too important to get stuck, and too urgent to wait for someone else to solve. It's made me rethink things like my own investments and whether I should use short-term rentals when I travel. It's made me curious about what other creative solutions are out there. I've known about home building and home repair nonprofits, but now I'm learning about organizations using market and finance solutions to get affordable homes into the hands of families. I'm learning about mutual aid groups, helping neighbors pay rent when they can't make ends meet. I plan to keep learning about all the ways to stay engaged with housing. There is a way forward for us as a community. I know it will take many solutions over a long period of time. It's worth it, because at the end of the day, this is about our neighbors.